Welcome back, everybody, to Navigating Amateur Motocross, episode number 25, brought to us by our good friends over at Energy Fuel. If you guys haven't paid attention, Energy Fuel is designed based around intensity and duration. There's 3 different formulations: an hour or less, 1 to 2 hours, and 3 and above. So make sure that your sports drink is matching what you're training and racing for, and you'll be amazed at what it does to your performance. Speaking of performance, the man, the myth, and the legend, I've got Mr. Derek Harris back. How you doing, brother?
Oh, man, doing really good. Good to see you.
Yeah, you too. You got me all warm and fuzzy. For those of you that have already watched the show, you could tell I was kind of like a kid in a candy store. We were talking a lot about the different types of metals, and I've learned a lot. I 100% transparency. But I wanted to keep our conversation going. We mentioned at the end of the last show that we were going to even dive into a little bit more in the motor, maybe a little main bearings, a little bit of rods. I'm fascinated by the fact that that has even yet so many different dynamics. Um, when we look at, if we go back to last show just for just a brief moment, when we look at the physical side of it, you and I were talking a couple months ago about the idea that you've got a buddy that goes to the gym and just says he's at the gym for an hour, but when you look at his workout logs, he's lifted 6 reps rather of the bench, and you're like, wait a second, you went to the gym how long and what'd you do? And we were talking a lot about, and you mentioned it more, you articulated it much better than I did, the difference between hours on the motor versus the number of cycles. Do you mind elaborating on that just a bit?
Yeah, this is a wonderful question, and it's like you said. So you can go to the gym and you can work out, and you could be lazy, and you went there and you were there for 1 hour. So if somebody asked where you were there. There's receipts for that. But you did 6 reps on the bench press, and then you sat around, listened to your podcast, drank a coffee, watched other people work out, and you went home. Well, maybe it was hard 6 reps, don't get me wrong, but you didn't do a heck of a lot. On the other side of that, you could have gone to the gym for an hour and just put in work, multiple reps and sets and different workouts, and you just hit everything. And maybe you overdid it, but you did a whole heck of a lot, and you're going to be completely worked or cooked at that point, and your body's going to need recovery and repair and all that stuff. Your engine's the same way. And this is where a lot of parents and people, they're like, man, back in my day, or this bike or that bike, or a trail rider says it can go 100 hours before you top in. Why is my race bike not going more than 10 before I break something, or before a piston cracks, or before we see a failure, or whatever? And the answer is there's a difference between hours and cycles. And really, it's cycles per hour. So if I fire your bike up, let it sit there and idle, it could do that till the end of time, until it runs out of gas, till you run out of money for putting gas in that thing. But if you hold that bike on the stand just wide open, as high as it will scream, and just sit there and do that, it's going to last a lot less time on the parts, because we're putting way more actual revolutions or loads or cycles on those parts in the same amount of time. So like over that course of an hour, if it's idling at 2,000 RPM versus being screamed out at 16,000 RPM, right? We have an 8 times more cycles. And then when it comes to engines, it's like, not only is it 8 times more cycles, it's 8 times more cycles at maximum load. Like you were in the gym putting up the highest weights you could do in your reps. And, idling is like you just barely doing body weight workouts, right? So that's kind of the difference. And a lot of families, as I had this recently, someone locally is like, man, they took a bike, they bought a new bike, blew it up, took it to a shop. It blew up in short order after that. And of course, it came to us and they want us to solve this problem for them. And I'm like, well, let me ask some important questions. How fast is your kid? Oh, well, he's okay. He's pretty good. Like, are you chasing national stuff, local, regional? What are we doing? Oh man, we've been going to the regional level and we're really wanting to chase the national level. I'm like, has he improved a lot over the last 2 years? Oh yeah, huge improvements. And it's like, okay, so your kid is harder on the bike now, which means, yeah, when you first owned it a year ago, it would go to the 50 hours that it blew up, which is unfortunate. It blew up at 50 hours for them, right? They bought a brand new bike, 50 hours needs a crank, which in our experience, if you're a fast national kid on an 85, you should be happy with that. Very happy with that. So then you get it fixed and your kid's harder on equipment now. And then it goes 35 hours and you lose a crank, right? And you take it back to that shop and you're blaming that shop saying, hey man, my bike blew up in less time. It's like, yeah, but your kid is way harder on the bike now. And so as a byproduct of that, you need to up your maintenance intervals. And I think you've talked about this going into facilities on the human body. It's the exact same thing on the bike. When you go from putting on 2 to 4 hours a week on your motorcycle at a local racer level, and then you decide to step up and you're getting better and you go to some facility, and now you put 10 hours a week on your bike and at a higher, more intense level, guess what? You got to work on your bike way more frequently, right? Just like your body. If you were just kind of like doing whatever here and there, and then all of a sudden you really stepped up your workout program, you're going to have to be way more in tune with your body. And you can allude to that, right? If we just go from no load to crazy body load, all of a sudden a lot, your phone, you could allude to this, phone rollouts or diet or nutrition or whatever, really you're going to come a roll. And then you have a little injury or something, right? That's kind of like a little parts failure. Well, you have to address that before you can go out there and continue your training. You pull a muscle, you can't just keep going wide open. Your bike scuffs the piston, it just can't keep going.
We have a very systematic program where I know that if you're on a 65, I know what physical benchmarks need to be in place for you to go to the 85, 85 to super mini, 125, four stroke. What do you use for checks and balances? Like the best scenario for me is when I get to work with a client starting at a very young age, because you get to see how they've adapted. When somebody, and the majority of our clients are vet riders, and the reason being is because they value time and money, and we can get results in a very specific linear format. We don't waste time. We get very, very specific results in a very quantified, specific period of time. Our checks and balances are, okay, I know what the next training cycle is going to demand of you. So I need to make sure that you get through this phase. You hit these benchmarks. Now I know you're ready, that you can take on the next phase without getting injured. How do you build relationships with anyone who buys a motor from yourself? And like you said, let's say in the last year, they have made that transition and they're now moving into a national level. Do you sit with them on a quarterly basis and talk about what you've seen motor wise? Like, mine's pretty easy because I've got Garmin and I've got MyFitnessPal and I've got some other wearable devices that we use for lactate, core body temperature, things like that. What do you guys have? And I
That's
honestly
really
don't know the
tough.
answer to it.
It's
Yeah.
really tough because how often do people listen? And how often do they want to listen? And so for our side of things, we don't have like a, hey, you pay me monthly just to get this advice. It's like, hey, you bought something, here you go. I recommend you do this. You never even hear it from people sometimes, right? And
Mhm.
sometimes they're like, they're successful. They do it, they figured it out, and hey, man, it's a year later. I'd like to refresh my engine, or hey, things are great. Or then you don't hear it. Some guy's like, oh, I blew this up. Next time you talk to him in person or something, like, oh, this broke and that broke, and you're like, well, what happened? What was your hours? Oh, I don't know. I'm like, did you follow our interval that we kind of recommended? And why didn't you reach out to us? We would have certainly taken a look at that. What's going on here? We actually had one recently that was really interesting. It was we built some super minis that were formerly some Lynx engines, I think. He grenaded two, which was red flag number one. Two fresh engines, both grenaded super low hours. Something is wrong here. Like Greg's one heck of an engine builder, and they are super successful. So okay, let's take a look at it. You take it apart. I'll be the first engine builder to tell you that, like, if I take an engine apart, all the bolts are tight, all the parts are in there. They're all good, well reputable known parts. And you had a parts failure at low hours. That's not that engine builder's fault. These are mechanical things. Unfortunately, they fail. No different than a human being tearing a hamstring, or, this happens and it sucks. We don't really know all the wins and whys, but, it happens at the NASA level, right? There are failures when they're doing everything they can do to prevent failures. And so, it's not easy. But, we did this and then we sent this engine out, and one of them, I don't remember what was going on with one of them, but one of them had like a weird deal. Like, it was a brand new engine and it wouldn't start. It would run, but it wouldn't start. And it started initially, and then after like 1 hour, it wouldn't start. And you're like, what the heck? And so we finally get this back and we take a look at it. And we figured out what it was, which is a failure I have never seen before and I haven't seen since. Although it kind of updated what my thought process was on part selection. It was a stock KTM 105 piston in this build, and it had a ringland collapse. There's like a pocket of weight saving thing underneath the ringland, just the stock piston has it, and the ring is supported above it like a bridge, and then there's a ring. The bridge had failed, and so the bridge was collapsed like this, and the ring could no longer be supported for compression. I have been in this literally my whole career. This piston has not really changed since forever if you go back. We've never, ever, ever seen that failure. And there was no other indications in the engine that something else had gone wrong, right? The engine still ran. It just didn't start because it was low in compression and, easily. So that's one of those things where it's like, you just, you address it and you move forward, right? So if you're a family and you're looking for hours, there's three things that have to come in mind. One, you got to listen to our experience. Like, hey, we just know from time that that particular engine build can go this many hours safely in general before you need to change X, Y, and Z. And if you're a national racer, do you want to show up at Loretta's with a 55-hour crankshaft when we know that that failure rate happens occasionally at 50? Probably not. That's a risk you have to take. I mean, you could certainly say, well, sometimes I go 100. Sure, sometimes they do. And then on the flip side of that, you as a dad have to evaluate your own parts a little bit with certainly our consultation. So like, hey, I pulled this piston out. Here's some really nice pictures. And, we have some specific things we look at. Oh, wow, your piston looks amazing. Your kid must not be as much of a hard kid on parts as that kid over there whose piston looks trashed at 10 hours, right? You can go 15, or let's move that up. So that's kind of the challenge of it, right? Is it, and I think that's an area we could be better. We could have maybe like you said, we have like a monthly program. Hey man, what's going on? Let's talk about your parts. Send me your link. That's certainly something we could be better at in your program. That's what you do.
I w- and it's interesting because, as we've said numerous times, this show is not scripted, as evidenced by our conversation here today. I've always found it interesting. You mentioned NASA, right? There's now documentation about when the space shuttle failed. You look at behind the scenes, it was essentially there was some shortcuts that were taken, and inevitably it cost people their lives. Obviously, racing motocross, I'm sure some people have gotten hurt significantly because of a mechanical failure. That's not where I'm going with this conversation. What I do want to bring up is usually when somebody doesn't perform to their capabilities, it's complacency in something that they know they should have done, but they didn't do. How much of that do you see? I'm sorry, let me elaborate. You know how much water to consume to stay properly hydrated, but you choose not to do it. You know the value of a warm up to get the glycogen synthase enzyme and the lactic acid shuffle moving, but you choose not to warm up. You use 3 of the 6 laps to get warmed up, and then you get mad that you ran out of time. All right. So, what kind of checks and balances do you have for that? Like, okay, you said that this athlete's not as hard as the one that's down the street at 10 hours on a motor. Why is there not an integration with a riding coach with a motor builder? Because, and I'll use one of the subjects that always comes up is arm pump. We don't get arm pump ever in training, and all of a sudden we get it in racing. I have a hard time with that. Because if you look at creating success, most people can't tell me what they did to be successful. They won a race. Okay, how'd you do it? I don't know. But this race was garbage. What went wrong? And then you get the litmus test of, or you get the long list of everything that went wrong. Wasn't that interesting? When things go wrong, you can give me a list, but then when you won, you can't tell me how you did it. That's called accidental success. Why is there not a better relationship between riding coaches and motor builders? See, selfishly for me, I've got a wearable device. I don't need a riding coach to give me the interpretation. I like to communicate with riding coaches. What are you seeing? What are you not seeing? Ironically, it's usually complacency. It's usually the number one complaint of a riding coach. Why is there not a tighter relationship between a riding coach and a motor builder?
I think that's a great question. I don't know that answer. I think there's so many agendas within the industry.
Mm.
Um, are you in with that place? Are you not in with that place? They have their biases and who they think is good and they don't think is good, or they grew up and supported by some shop, so they want to support that shop, or whatever. I don't
Yep.
know the answer to that. I think that's a great question. You would think that the coach would want the best for their athlete, so they just work with whoever. Hey, I don't care who you work with. Let's just discuss this. Let's get better at this. Um, I don't know. I think that's a great question, and I think that it's crazy to me. Like you said, some kids are hard on parts, some kids aren't hard on parts. So I just using them as an example, and this is gonna, I don't think he'll mind me sharing this stuff. Is like Andrew Short. We've been supporting and helping out his son and Andrew a little bit the last 2 years, and we recently rebuilt some engines for him that I would describe to someone as when they came in, the engines looked visually nice. They weren't haggard looking, weren't stained and just dirty and just terrible. And one of them had 50 hours on it. You could not tell the engine looked low hour. And that's how I think you should keep your bike. It's just a little bit of effort and work, right? It's nothing crazy. Wash your bike correctly, use the right products, don't etch it, like dry it off, like do those things.
Yeah.
Number two is whenever I've done anything with them specifically, his kid is not the fastest kid in the country in 125s right now. Like, let's just be clear. He is a very good 125 rider. I have no idea where he would have shaken down at Spring Nationals this year. We don't know. He wasn't there. But he's been making steps towards, the front. So he won the C class last year on 125s. And I think he won or his top 5 motos at Loretta's this year in C. So we're talking about a kid who's, maybe 20th. I think he's maybe around 20th in the open class, you would call it, 125 schoolboy last year, and then hopefully making steps. So let's call the kid 10 to 20th and hopefully better for them. But who knows? Whenever you took apart their parts, they look great. Their pistons look nice. They don't look overly rubbed or worn down, and they're not completely worn out in the way you see with other engines, and their parts last, right? Like, they don't have a lot of failures in general. They have some here and there, but usually they're pretty good. Why is it that his kid, who's riding the same bike that everybody else is riding and using the same premixes and the same program and the same everything and the same fuels, their bikes look really good when I see them? And then I have an engine in the shop here now that the guy on the piece of paper swears has 3 hours on it. If you were to just ask me how many hours I thought the engine had when I opened the crate, I would have said 100. It's just dirt stained and permanently stained and edged and terrible looking. And I'm like, how is it possible that this has what you call 3 hours? And then you get into it, and I have never seen an engine look like this. And it was completely blown up, number one, and just caked on like depository. I've never seen anything quite like it. Now, in my mind, as an engine shop, knowing what I know, being a whole career, I'd be like, that is not a 3-hour engine. I'm sorry, you can't do that in 3 hours. But if it is, what the heck are those guys doing? Right? Like, dude.
Or what are they not doing that they should have been doing? Like, no air filter? Like, what do you...
Yeah, that's what it looked like, right? Like, hey, when you get this back, you really should follow some of these notes, right? Like,
Yeah.
So if you're the dad that your stuff's constantly breaking and it's just never looking good, something is up. Now, sometimes, right, if you have a Justin Barsha kid, which most of the kids are nowadays, I'm sorry, man, you're just going to have to do parts at really frequent intervals. There's no way around it. There's no part made that can endure the stresses, right, for a lifetime that these kids will put them through. And we talk about what material pistons are. Can they be better? Can they not be better? Guess what? Every company out there is really trying to do the best they can. They want these things to last. Really, like KTM doesn't want their bike to not last. Yamaha doesn't want their bike to not last. Both KTM and Yamaha use the same piston materials with the same design constructions and all that stuff. That's just currently kind of the best solution that exists. And until, like I said, maybe 3D printed steel comes about that's a little bit stronger, it just isn't out there, right? So if your kid's tearing stuff up, really look, you got to look out inwardly a little bit. And then I always stress, we talked about, right before the show's talk, I was saying, man, I saw this clip of James Stewart and it just reminded me of the era I grew up in. I grew up in an era where you did not hold the bike wide open in the air. Even in the 2-stroke era. I grew up on 2-strokes. All my competitors are on 2-strokes. 4-strokes did not exist till I became a teenager. James Stewart's riding at Glen Helen, dominating by 30 seconds in this clip. And he's in the meat of the power, not over rev down the straightaways. Number one, very obvious. You can hear it. Most people nowadays would say he was lugging. Nope, meat of the power. Number two, on jumps, he would jump, he'd be off the throttle, and then right before he landed, he would hit the gas. And you could hear in the background of this video, this national going on, the other bikes doing the same thing. That's the era I grew up in. I did that. Every other kid did that. And in our day, when you were getting good at riding, when you knew you were getting decent was when you could make the bike sound just perfect when you landed it. You would hit the gas and the clutch right at the right time, and it sounded awesome.
Yep.
But it wasn't just wide open in the air the whole time. Now, I have a bone to pick with kids and dads, and that sounds fast. Well, I'm sorry, but it's just tearing your parts up. I don't care how much you scream it in the air. It will not drive. It's not on the ground, right? That's why we scrub jumps, to get on the ground sooner. So sure, can you do it? Yes. Does it sound fast? Yes. Do trainers, in my opinion, love that nowadays? Yes, because when they tell a kid, go do your sprint lap, give me everything you got, the kid acts like he's giving 100% effort. And by screaming that motorcycle, it sounds, oh yeah, he has intention. He's trying that lap. He's doing all he can do. But I always laugh because meanwhile, you could take, let's say, a 10th place kid at an amateur national who's solidly 10th. No matter what start, whatever, he's a 10th place kid. He's a heck of a national rider. And you could go take Ken Roxon, Chase Sexton, right? Jet Lawrence, throw them on any bike out there, and they could never scream the bike wide open, keep it right in the meat of the power, do everything correctly, and smoke your kid. And that's sad. I want your kid to be good, right? But that's just how good they are. And it doesn't take holding the bike wide open to do it. Corner speed, right? Bumps and technique and all the things that those guys are just the best in the world at, hence the fact they're on TV, and I don't know. So yeah, to me, off on the tangent, it's just why certain parts look bad. They don't look bad. If you're tearing parts up, look in the mirror and say, what can we do? We want to save money. We don't need to be putting pistons in this thing every 3 hours because your kid screams it all the time. Does he need to scream it? Does it make him faster? If it doesn't, start working on the things that do.
The one part that I'm a little bit baffled with is in the mechanical world, what they did in automobiles in 1927 was built on, and then in 57, and then in 2007, and 2000. My point being is, it's not like every year we act like we don't have pre-existing information mechanically. We build off of that knowledge. When you come over to the physiology world, we didn't know what the long-term ramifications for high-intensity interval training was. For our listeners, that would be what most people consider CrossFit. Well, now if you start looking at different journals of medicine, they're starting to see, because we're now 10 to 15 years, almost 20 years removed from when that became popular, now we're starting to see parts of the heart are starting to plaque associated with high-intensity interval training. We're starting to see the physical fallout of high-intensity interval training, CrossFit style. We have no idea what the fallout of intermittent fasting is going to be. We don't know what the fallout of peptides are going to be, but it's coming. It's just going to take another decade for us to see that information. I don't see that when I look at the mechanical, what you guys did last week, you can build on this week. If you're showing me, if I take the heart rate data of an individual and we take film, we get with a riding coach like Ben Riddle, and we sit down and with you as a motor builder, and we sit down and we go, okay, let's connect all the dots. We put a brand new motor in. Let's just say we fast forward 10 hours. I can look at average and max heart rate. I can look at film, where they're positioning on the bike. Are they staying centered over the bike? Is the bike pretty much upright? Ben Riddle does a phenomenal job making sure that people are where they need to be, lean angle, et cetera, et cetera. Well, if we now fast forward the physical side, I won't know the ramifications if an athlete ate enough and got enough sleep for 6 months. That's not usual. That is the pivot point of the human body. What you do today, you'll see evidence of it positively or negatively 6 months from now. This is what irritates a lot of athletes, young and old, that why can't I see an improvement by Friday? It's not going to happen. You, on the other hand, you literally could be at the test track on a Monday, do 5 days of testing at Glen Helen or Paris, and you know what the ramification is by Friday. And on Monday morning, you could pivot immediately. Why are we, as an industry, if we know that kind of excessive heat, high rev, not in the peak of the power band, valve floating, the whole night, why do we keep seeing it repeat itself? In your opinion, is it facilities, trainers, mindset, ignorance, like not knowing what it's doing to the
I
bike?
think it's a combination of not knowing,
Okay.
ignorance, right? And that's not an insult. Ignorance
Like
means the
not
lack of
knowing,
knowledge.
textbook ignorance. Yeah.
Yep, textbook ignorance, and not an insult, just not knowing. And also flavor of the month, which means if it sounds fast, it's got to be fast. If I tell people all the time, if you really want to know where the meat of the power of your 125, 85, 65 is, go listen to a Cobra 50 on the clutch. So when they leave the gate and it goes, wah, that's where that bike pulls its best. That's why it's clutched there. And then when that clutch finally locks up and the RPM start to climb, that's technically over rev for that bike. So it's going, where they sound sweet, we're like, oh, that thing's singing. It sounds really good. That's way past where actual peak pulling power is. Now, parents will say, yeah, but it's going faster out there. But that's because the motor and the tire are connected to each other. So for it to go faster, the RPMs have to climb, right? And so we don't climb them when we're on the clutch, right? The clutch is slipping some amount until that the rear tire speeds up to the bike speed, and then the clutch locks, and then the RPMs keep climbing and the bike keeps going faster. But there's a reason from an engineering standpoint that we pick the RPM we pick to clutch to. And that's where it pulls its best at. So if you have an 85 or 125 or 65, it should sound when you're coming out of a corner, when you're coming up to a big jump, when you're on the start straight, it should sound more like that Cobra 50 on the clutch than it should sound because you're in the peak pulling power of the engine. And so I think that we just have I'm a victim of this. Man, it sounds good when it's up there, right? Oh, that sounds good, but it doesn't mean it's the fastest way to get around the racetrack. And we've talked about this in drag racing. You'll learn this so quickly when you drag race two bikes. And so now the four stroke's a little more complicated. This one's really tough. The modern four stroke, crazy wide power, which is a huge issue in our sport right now because people are not making use of that power. So what I mean by that is a lot of kids are up on the rev limiter, and that prevents them from going faster, meaning when you're hitting the rev limiter, the bike will not mile an hour any faster. They could just shift and it will pull it. I promise. Any four stroke out there has a peak torque that's really damn near peak at 9,000 RPM, and the limiters are up around 14,000 on a 250F. So we have a 5,000 RPM window in which we can operate. Two strokes have about a 1,500 RPM window. So when a dad says, oh, but he's got to ride that way, I'm like, what do you mean? He just came off an 85. Your kid was keeping it when he wanted to. If he wanted a whole shot, wanted to clear a jump that was big, wanted to out accelerate his buddy, he kept it in that 1,500 RPM window to do so. That's where the bike pulls. So you mean to tell me that on this four stroke, your kid cannot keep it in this 5,000 RPM window? And the answer is they can't.
Right.
Because I think it's just we listen to Justin Barsha and he grew up that way, and then Deegan, and like the whole sport has shifted to what sounds fast. But the reality is that those guys not only ride that way, they're elite at cornering. So they bring a lot of speed around that racetrack, even if they're leaving little tidbits on the table by not quite shifting on time. And let's be frank, I love Justin Barsha, just to be clear. I love the dude. I bet you he would be 2% better if he just did a little about what we talk about better. And how much better would have his career been if he could have been 2% better going back 10 years ago? That's his style. I get it. That's how he is. But, if he really, I bet you even if he reflected and said, if I really wanted to chase every little 1/10%, I probably would have had to re-ingrain some of these habits I had. But those habits go so deep, right? It's just hard to do. So I don't know. I wish that parents would, I was riding, I haven't been riding. I think we talked about this. I just started riding a little bit. I'm riding like terrible. It's 10 years removed, the body's shot, all this stuff. So not riding good. Having said that, a 250F still blows my mind today how good they are. It's unfreaking believable. And I'm riding, I have a Husky that I got. My best friend's got a Yamaha. I've ridden some Cowies. I've ridden everything and just playing around on different bikes. And it's funny to me because I'm like, okay, KTM's going to have terrible bottom. All the magazines, you can't pull third gear on it. So I'm like, all right, well, let me stick it in third gear and see what it does, right? Like I know what they say. Huh. No problem. Don't even have to touch the clutch. Bike pulls it just fine. Go ride the Yamaha. Put it in third gear. Oh, wow. Okay. There's a little bit of a difference feel here. The Yamaha feels a little quicker to light up. It's a little bit snappier feeling. But could I get the jump out of the turn that you had to go wide open on for both bikes? Yep. Got it on both bikes. Did I have to touch a clutch on both bikes? Nope. Didn't have to touch the clutch. So did I lug it way below this window we're talking about just intentionally to do it to see what it'll do? Yes, I did. The bikes will do more than you give them credit for nowadays on the four stroke. And I think that we need to just try to teach parents to shift their mentality. Like, hey, shift the bike until it flat out will not pull it. And I urge people, go listen to Christophe Purcell if you can find those old motos. If you can hear how he rode that bike, everybody thought he was lugging it. The reality was he was right at peak torque. And that's just how he rode. Right? Now, granted, Villapoto screamed the bike and up on the rev limiter, and they battled it out for a title. You could do both ways, but you could go elite, top-level speed, almost winning a national championship against one of the GOATs, right? And ride your bike at a lower RPM. Purcell absolutely proved that. And I think more families need to actually put effort into that, be it a two-stroke or be it a four-stroke. I promise you, you'd be better for it.
I don't know if you're at liberty to talk about this or not. For me, when you're looking at it from a human performance standpoint, there's a threshold called the anaerobic threshold, right? You could be feeling competitive at 178 and go to 181 and grenade yourself. Just cross that little threshold. Now the number is very nebulous. It's completely different for
whatever for every guy.
Right.
Yeah.
Every person's a little bit different based on hydration, rest, fitness, background, the whole 9 yards. But If you cross that anaerobic threshold, there's one guarantee: you're going to go backwards. Because once you go anaerobic, the body will physically slow itself down to where it can get back to becoming aerobic, and the race has left you. So, without giving away our trade secrets, it's pretty straightforward, right? Your number one goal is to never go across that threshold, because the only guarantee in the world of physiology is you will go backwards. The question is, how far will you go back before you can get back to an aerobic state that allows you to resume? Put it in racing terms: you're sitting there humming along at a 2-minute lap time, you're at 178. You go to 181, lap times go to 207, 217 until the aerobic comes back. Then you're going to maybe get down to 205s. You'll never get back to that 2-minute lap time because you've gone anaerobic, and there's still other bodily functions and chemistry that has to happen at a blood level. Why? I don't want to put you on the spot, and if you can't answer it, we'll move on. Why are the factory teams not putting these riders and saying, look, guys, I don't care what you think. Here's the numbers on a dyno, almost like driving like the Formula One cars, right? They go
Right.
scheme, they're shifting when it just turns orange. They never let it go to red. They don't shift it in yellow. They don't shift it in red. They shift it in that orange. Why have you experienced conversations with these factory teams, with these key riders? Or does it even come up as a conversation because they're the best, so we just leave them alone?
Yeah, I think we have a lot of issues here. So one is, if a kid's winning, you don't mess with it. So Deegan definitely rode the bike really hard early on and winning. So who cares? He's winning. That's the fastest way he can go around a dirt bike track. And as a team, we'll put motors in it, every moto, if we have to. We like to win, and we have the budget to do it. There's been talks like Mitch talking about with a bunch of his guys in the past, and like, some of the comments there like, hey guys, you're over revving. You need to shift the bike. So I think they've talked to them about it. I have found that the really good guys, even the ones like the Deegans, when they want to win a drag race, when they need to go fast, they do it perfectly. It's in the margins, I call it, where they don't. So there's times where they're like, I really don't want to go any faster right here, and I don't want to upshift and then downshift. So I'm just going to bang the rev limiter through this bump section for the next 10 yards or 20 yards, and that's fine for me. But when they really want to get a whole shot, or they really want to do something correctly, they do it correctly. Now, on the flip side of that, as a team, you're always chasing gains, right? So if your rider rides this way and you just can't, you're like, all right, well, we got to make this bike kind of sort of fit you. So let's work on our power placement or whatever. Now, I will say, in the 250 world, and I think this is true of Star, we've been chasing this for years, right? I truly believe that their bike currently is designed to make power right up near the limiter. Because if you did all of this correctly, if you engineered it all right, you do everything just right, you will make more horsepower by doing that. You just make the bike narrower and harder to ride. And so then it requires your riders kind of to do that. And so I actually think that the Star bike, being as fast as it is and being probably one of the best 250s out there right now, it had been for years, and I think it still is. They've done that in order to get that quote unquote power advantage, but they've sacrificed a little bit of the rideability of the bike. And I also think that that means that, and to be frank, like, if you decide to go that route, you are going to make your motors cost more money because they're going to last a lot less time. And so obviously at that level, they don't care. That's not on their radar. Now at the amateur level, and I have so much sourcing on this. Like, I have so much sourcing on this, right? And we've been involved with a whole bunch of stuff. Parents who are convinced that it's the factory bike and that Star's out there to, doing it with their full works bike and whatever. Very, very rarely has that ever been the case. The factories don't want to bring that stuff out to play at some of these races. And I think guys like Mitch Payton, because I know for a fact what's in a lot of those Team Green bikes, and we've actually had one here on the dyno at one point, and stuff like that. Like, Mitch has been smart enough to know that what they're selling those guys is plenty enough to win. It's a really good package. And don't get me wrong, the Cowie boys are on an elite amateur level package. However, it is nothing like their works bike. So if you're, and the difference might be 5%, but that's a hard 5% to find, right?
Sure.
So if you're convinced that you're losing because, they're on the PC bike, trust me, that's not why you're losing. Now, if you want that bike, you might have to go spend 50 grand for Mitch to get it, meaning he'll sell you the motor and the suspension and the clamps and the link, right? All that stuff. But it's just not a full works bike. So that's kind of, if you're at the amateurs and you're thinking, we're losing because of this or that. I see it time in and time again, right? It's just not what you think. And we've had, our own winning bikes. We've had other winning bikes come through the shop in years past, after the fact, somebody buys it. Or, I mean, heck, Shorty is on the bikes that he's racing on 125s. If I remember right, I think are on Tristan Pruitt's old race 125s. So when they got off those bikes, he sold them as a package, and Shorty bought really good bikes, right? Like bikes that he knew could be good because Pruitt's a top amateur.
Yeah.
We've been inside and on the dyno and left, right, and sideways on every single piece of that. And I will tell you right now that they don't dyno particularly spectacular, and they don't have anything particularly spectacular in them. We've gone through and done our stuff and done nothing crazy with them. They're just good running bikes that literally any dad could go out and build for not that much money, to be perfectly frank. It's not a crazy package, and you could be competitive. So, there's an example of what were really good bikes. A lot of dads out there were like, that's the best bike on the track when Pruitt owned them. And that's what dads think today. And Pruitt is on elite amateur, packaging, but he's
Sure.
not on true work stuff. Right. So anyway, I got off topic on that, but
Go back to the you mentioned the 4 strokes got around that 5,000 window spread. Is stars, like you said, if they're going after that power at the very, very top, does that pull that down to a 2,000 or a 1,500 range, or is it just
yes.
5,000 at the upper?
So I think it would shorten it, in my opinion. So we've been chasing this for a few years now. We're working really hard on seeing if I, as a private shop, can make this a reality. So what are the challenges? Number one, how do you move the power up, right? Well, there's ways to do that, in my opinion. Just what we're learning and testing with, and like quote unquote the theory. There's some engineering behind this. With all right, we do this with the cams, we do this with the intake track length, we change the pipe tune length, and we tune this package to work at a higher RPM. But number two is, how do I make it reliable at high RPM? Well, number one is, if I don't raise the rev limiter, for the most part, its reliability level is the same. I don't stress the piston, the rod, bearings, anything differently. Even though I make more power, that's really not the engineering stresses on your parts. It's all RPM. But if I move the power up, right, now I start narrowing my window. So let's say the rev limiter is 14 and peak torque's from 9-ish onwards, 9, and then the bike carries. Well, we got from 9 to 14. Let's say I moved peak torque to 12. Now I've got 12 to 14. So I've got a 2,000 RPM window that is really its sweet spot. So how do I widen it? Well, then I have to raise the rev limiter. Now, all the factory bikes, like the true, really elite factory bikes, have very high rev limits. Undisclosed. You're never going to know exactly what they are. Obviously, you can sniff it certain ways with apps and stuff like that, but way, way higher. And in order to do that is where the hard engineering challenge comes in. So if I move my peak torque to 12 and I wanted 5,000, I would need 17,000 RPM, which I have good sourcing years ago that factory KTM in Europe was doing. So that bike in Europe was a 17,000 RPM bike. So there. Now, whether or not that translates to the US is hard to know because they have different rules, different parts, different things you can do, right? But I have absolutely no doubt that be it Star, PC, Honda, Kawasaki, you name it, their limiters are substantially up from stock. What that number is, don't know, right? With their exact number. And that's where the challenge comes in for reliability. So now we got to come up with valve springs and rods and pistons and bearings and case strength that can take these additional inertia forces, right? And that's where all the loads come from. And inertia scales squared. So every little bit we increase the RPM really increases the loads on our parts. And that, in my opinion, if you're really wondering what a true factory bike difference is versus like an amateur bike, is that exact difference.
You're talking about a mathematical square.
A mathematical square.
Wow.
So load goes up with
Oh,
RPM
huge.
squared, right?
Oh.
So it's a big, big difference when it comes to valve springs, valve masses, acceleration rates, rod loads, piston loads, main bearing loads. Now, luckily, the way that works is it's like a 2x RPM would be a 4x in load, okay? But we're not 2xing our RPM. So when we go from stock 14 to, let's say your really elite amateur bike might be in the 15.5 range. We're not selling anything like that currently, but let's just say there's somebody out there who was, right? It's not 30,000 RPM, right? So yes, it's squared. The loads went way up, but we're talking about a relatively small difference on that square. So luckily, though, you can get 1,000 RPM through hard engineering and work. But like I said, if we had to do 4 times the load for the valve spring, 4 times as stiff, we had to do 4 times the strength for the rod and 4 times the strength for the piston. Well, how do you do that? I mean, a piston has to be light, right? So 4 times stronger means 4 times the mass. Well, then it's way more load. We can't do that, right? So that's where these factory bikes are truly, truly elite. But it's also why these teams are changing parts in motors every single week, right? Is because they push these parts to their absolute limit, and they can't, the parts are close to failure at all times.
Can you put it in layman's terms? If you're squaring the load based on the RPMs, what is that doing to the miles per hour if you're shifting spot on?
That's a direct ratio. So whatever the ratio is, let's say your bike went 40 miles an hour in third gear or whatever it was at 14, whatever that ratio difference is to say 15, which is not 10%. So that's probably
Yeah.
7%, right? You would get a 7% improvement. So 7% for 4 is probably 3 miles an hour. So the difference that your bike would be going at the rev limiter would be 3 miles an hour more, which doesn't sound like a lot, but in reality, on a start,
Insane
yes,
difference.
yes,
3 miles an hour is insane difference.
yes.
And I've never had somebody be able to give me, anybody who's been with me at my level 1 performance camp, what do I always talk about? Gear inches. Grab a gear. For 1 second on the track, you're going to go further in a second by being 1 gear taller.
Mm-hmm.
When I do performance camps, if I'm allowed to travel with my radar gun, I'll have them change gears, and we'll actually show them the speed difference coming into a corner when you're 1 gear taller. Now, I'm certainly not a suspension engineer like you are, but I'm like, okay, guys, if you're 1 gear taller, what's that do to your RPMs? Everybody raises their hand, lowers the RPMs. Okay, what's that do to the stiffness of the rear? Nobody raises their hands. I'm like, bring the RPMs down, and you got to plush your rear end. Now you're not riding a pogo stick into it. So now you're coming in faster with a softer rear end, i.e. Ken Roxon, Jet Lawrence. Watch them. And it's just, that's why I so appreciate you being willing to share your knowledge with all of our listeners, because to me, it's like we said, yeah, you can just go guts to the wall if you want, and you blow yourself up and you come back, you go, yeah, I went anaerobic, I went backwards. Well, that's a guarantee. That's a physiological guarantee. Well, if you bounce off the rev limiter and you hit a point of diminishing returns where now the bike is decelerating simply because it doesn't have the ability to continue to pull, now you're talking about grabbing 1 gear, getting 7% improvement, which is almost 3 miles an hour at 40 miles an hour. Who doesn't want a half mile an hour, much less 3 miles? Now, I always say this whenever I do my performance camps. I can show you how to create speed on a bike. My concern is I don't know that you have the brain capacity to process the speed, and I don't know that you have the physical strength to decelerate a bike, get the lean angle, and get the proper exit, because it's all linear, right? You come in 3 miles an hour faster, you got to be careful, especially when you exit at 3 miles an hour faster, then you end up over jumping the next jump.
Well, that's a
That's
challenge we
where
have with performance engines. So let's say you have a 2-stroke. Okay, 2-strokes are their RPM window of usable functional power is determined by the pipe.
usable.
Yeah, usable functional power, meaning they will rev higher than this, but they don't make their sweet power outside of this range. And the range is the pipe length. It's a tuned length. The pipe doesn't change itself in length, so it's always the same. And so that means that basically every single 2-stroke that's out there on the track, if they're running a very similar pipe, which they all are all peaking their peak horsepower around a very, very similar number. Okay, so, oh, listen how high that bike revs. Yeah, but is it making power there? Right? There's a question about that. If he's just holding it wide open and it revs out down the straightaway, that's great. However, if he grabbed a gear, he'd be going faster, number one, because he'd be back in the power. So on that concept, it's like, let's say you build a fast 2-stroke. I don't care who builds it, right? We build it, Mitch builds it, Lynx builds it, right? There's a lot of great guys, VP, a whole bunch of great builders out there.
Yep.
It's gonna, let's say I give you the exact same bike, but it's just faster, and you have the same gearing, you do nothing differently, and your kid is used to coming out of a corner in second gear, hitting the throttle, and the bike just happens to be, for his pace, the jump, that scenario, it goes, and he jumps the jump, and he just clears it in second gear perfectly. So he knows that that's how he clears this jump. You give him a faster bike, you change nothing. He comes out of turn, he hits the throttle in second, and he goes, and then it reaches the end of its power, where, and you can feel this as an athlete, right? 2-strokes have a pulling part, and then they'll still rev, but they don't pull. And, as we know, when you jump a jump, most people like to be loaded and accelerating a little bit up the face, right? They want to be having pull up the face to load the bike consistently. So if it wraps out and starts going down what we call the descending part of the torque curve, where it's making less torque the more you rev it, which is pulling power, the bike stops pulling hard. So then the kid says, oh, this bike revs out faster. I can't do this jump in second anymore. The answer is 100% you can. You're still going the speed, but you got to that speed earlier. So now your body's like, well, I'm no longer accelerating. Our bodies can't feel speed, believe it or not. If you closed your eyes, you're going 80 or you're going 10 or you're going 1,000. If you were closed and you were not accelerating, you cannot feel it. You don't know. It's when you change your speed that you can feel it. We feel acceleration as humans. So when you stop accelerating up that jump face, you go, oh shit, this is not what I'm supposed to do. My bike needs to accelerate through the face. And then you say it doesn't rev out as Reddit. So you say, no, you need to click third gear, your bike's faster, and you'll keep pulling. But they go, I don't have the tools to do this because now I'm going faster than I need to jump the jump. And you're like, yeah, but how are you supposed to get a better lap time? If all you do is the bare minimum required to jump a jump, between jumps, right? Like if you had your peak speed at the takeoff of every jump, well, you're going to be very limited in your lap time. So the ultra elite guys, no, they're searching for time between the corners, between the jumps, in the corners, right? So they're going to accelerate out of turn, grab a gear, and then they're going to find a way to scrub and slow down and get the speed they need or over jump the jump if they need to, right? And that's something that is very hard to teach, right? It's like when you're talking about on speed. And the other part of that is your bike's faster, like just like you said so accurately. Okay, we got you a faster bike, or you grabbed a gear like you're supposed to, and now we're doing 3 miles an hour faster, which is only 3, and we're coming into a bump section for a corner, and now we're going faster. Do you have the tools, like you said, mentally, physically, strength-wise, skill-wise, to go 3 miles an hour faster through that bump section? Do you know how to slow down either faster or not? Or like that's the challenge. And we see it routinely where just kids don't have that toolbox. So a lot of times you give them a much faster bike. They're in love with it. It makes everything on the track easier, right? Everything. And yet their lap time, 0 improvement. And it's because they go the same speed over the jumps. They go the same speed into the bumps, which means they let off a little earlier. And they just don't know how to go faster. No matter how much motor you give them, it's just not in them currently. And I mean, I actually Spring Nationals at Spring Ding just happened, and I watched lap times here and there between every night. I went through and scrolled through results and looked and whatever, and look at lap times. And we've already talked about this in the show, but when a dad comes to you in 250C at Loretta's and is like, "Oh, it's the bike," and you're like, "Huh, fastest 65 rider here just kicked your lap time's ass."
Yep.
What do you mean it's the bike? Oh, that 65's fast. I'm like, yeah, it's about a third the horsepower your bike is. It's got tiny little tires on it. It's got not as good a suspension, and it's got a way younger rider. What do you mean it's the bike, right? Well, ours just isn't right. It's just not good enough for us. I'm not saying through us. I'm just saying in general, right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, maybe you're right. Maybe your bike is not good enough for your kid to go faster, but wait a second. You're 10 seconds a lap off of that 65 rider?
Right.
Uh,
Well, that's the problem with our sport is the blame game. I was just talking to somebody this morning about this, and when somebody all of the clients we work with, we put through a pretty strict interview process. If you've been through 2 facilities, now on your 3rd, you've been through 5 riding coaches, you've gone through 4 motor builders, you've gone through 3 suspension companies, we won't work with you. Because it's very, very clear it's never gonna be the athlete's responsibility, and I hate to throw parents under the bus, but you're the worst. You make excuses for your kids like I've never seen before, and you need to stop. Because, when you're looking at the idea that you can only throw so much money and so many resources in so many different directions, the brass tacks comes down to your athlete at the end of the day. And this is the thing like you were just talking about. When we're looking at building strength, I need to make sure that you're ready for the 85 before you get on it. Be ready for the 125 before you get on it. It's not if we're going there, it's always a matter of when. But when they're on the smaller bikes, they go, "Oh, that's just you just want to get it into my rear. You want to get my wallet." No, I really would like to not see your son get injured. I'd like to see your daughter go to the next size bike and not get injured. But unfortunately, when do they call us? After they become injured and they go, oh, they have that epiphany where they're like, this thing is a lot faster. It's a lot, whether it's the wheel height or the size of the wheels, the velocity of the bike, whatever. Like we say, it's not the wreck that hurts. It's the immediate stop that hurts so much. And putting all sarcasm aside, Now you start to run into the idea, and this is where I like to meld all of our concepts like we do in all of our shows. I'm always trying to make sure that you're strong enough for the next bike, but I'm also trying to make sure that you're ready for that next level of speed, whatever it is. Could be on the same bike that you're going to be on for 4 years. You're going to get to like the Caden Braswells. You get to a point where you're on a 254 stroke. Power is all pretty relevant for here on out. Now we're just looking for these little marginal gains here and there. But what I find is interesting, if I say to you physiologically, please do not go above this heart rate because you will grenade yourself and go backwards. We can get very specific and call it anaerobic. We can call it whatever you want. Just understand, thanks to a heart rate monitor, you know where that number's at. We've tested it. We've done it at different temperatures for different durations. Your brain's ability to process speed is directly related to your blood sugar levels, your, your glycogen levels in your liver, which feeds your brain. Put those two together. You're not physically strong enough to decelerate and accelerate for 20 minutes at Loretta's on a very rough track when it's hot and it's humid. So now that's the suspension's fault. That's a motor that doesn't pull. That's a fitness program that let you down. Well, how did that happen? Oh, wait, it wasn't a preparation issue. It was a strategical mistake. Your athlete came around on lap number 2. They're in 38th place because they got a bad gate pick. They throw it away because they go beyond what they're capable of holding. It is a 20-minute moto, right? If I were to interview before the moto and I say to you, hey, Derek, how long is the moto at Loretta's? I'm pretty sure 99.99% of the people there would be able to tell me it's a 20-minute moto. They're going to tell me they're going to race 3 motos over 5 days per class. Most people know it's going to be hotter than heck and pretty humid. But then how many people go to Loretta's and act surprised that it's hot, it's humid, it's 20 minutes in duration, the track gets really rough? What did you guys get ready for? And then when you come back to me from an engineering standpoint and you say, hey, Rob, we can teach these kids when to shift. I can show them on the chart because I want to earn their confidence. You show them the dyno report. They maybe listen to the sound, maybe even put them on the bike, right? You let them shift the gears, looking at the dyno, get a feel for what does that feel like. Now go to the track and apply it. And then this to me is where our responsibility comes in. I need to make sure that you're strong enough to ride the bike that Derek just built for you. Then you need to be strong enough to do what your riding coach, whether it's stand up, sit down in a corner. I'm amazed, Derek. I've never had a pro card. And I'm amazed how many kids I work with that are at facilities that are not being taught how to use a front brake.
I I I mean, starts, right? There's a epidemic of poor starting technique. And at this point, there's no excuse. Tons of video content exists on the internet of the best in the world. I watch it all the time. I watch TV and then I go watch YouTube and I watch what these guys do. And it's gotten to a point where all of the elite guys are doing basically the same thing. They have their own little takes on it, but if you watch really close, they all do it. And so I think I love this about Deegan. So they were struggling a little bit, right? And they hadn't quite figured it out. And they went back to the lab, quote unquote, and they did that. And he talked about it. And all of a sudden, his starts got a lot better. Now we'll see if they sustain. He's not been like an Alessi starter, right? His whole career has been like a less than Alessi starter. But recently, he's been getting some good starts. They worked hard at it by studying others who were doing it consistently, figuring out what works for them, something that's repeatable. But the fundamentals of this are the same for a lot of athletes. And so I'm just shocked when I go to a race and I see the same thing over and over again. These kids train full time now, right? All of them do. And they practice starts pretty much, I think, every day. I mean, I could be wrong about that. We talked about this in the last show. Are you practicing right? And that's a good question. But number 2 is like technique wise, if you're not doing the same thing every time and like it's something you're happy with, you figured out, okay, this works for me, then what are you doing? Right? Like, why is your form changing on race day? Or why is this wrong? Or why is that wrong? And I don't get it. But like you said, it's just one of those, like, we know what we should do. You should go work on it. You should make that repeatable. That's the one thing that any athlete in this sport could nail down. And you think it's about the bike. It's not. I hate to say that as a builder and a developer. It is not. If your bike is bone stock, you could go to an amateur national and pull hole shots on it if you execute correctly. It won't happen as often, right, as somebody with a better bike than you, but I promise you it can happen. And people cannot believe that. Actually, this is a great debate. I think you were on the Hopper show. I think, were you a part of the show? I hadn't watched it all the way through. I saw his clips about the whole debate about factory equipment. And were you on that show? What was his commentary? I think he said something like, from your perspective, it was like, hey, factory bikes, that's why we get lappers, and these elite guys are way better and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, he said factory bike roughly 3 seconds faster immediately for a privateer.
Okay, so I put out feelers after that. Me and Johnny texted a little bit. We obviously have a disagreement of opinion, and there's no swaying him, and I feel like there's no swaying me until I see otherwise.
Yeah.
I texted around some pretty prominent individuals at various locations at factory efforts. The Honda boys that I got, they think that full works outdoor bike to bone stock suspension, they think is about 2 seconds a lap. And they
And that's
have
coming
done,
from factory Honda.
yeah, and they have done this type of testing. They think that with the right suspension and not even works, so just revalved in the stiff, we talked about this window, right? So
Yeah.
here's the window you need to be in to go that elite level Jet Lawrence pace. And here's the window that the stock bike is. It's too soft for him. With a standard revalve, you can put the stock stuff in the window. The difference between a work set of suspension and that would be that the works is like, he likes this, right?
Mm-hmm.
But you can do a standard revalve and get you here. They think the difference might be a couple tenths, which is sad. They work their asses off on that
crazy.
bike. Right
Yeah,
now,
it's crazy.
repeatability, lap over lap, 35 minutes. That's a whole different discussion. And we chatted on that. And it could equate to, I mean, these races right now in Supercross are coming down to less than 5 seconds at the end of 20 minutes for the victor and second, and even third sometimes. So really, that's what these teams are working their asses off. Because if you find 1% in your guys 5 seconds a lap at the end of the race better, he might win. But that's a different debate. I think outdoors, and now 250 is a whole different ballgame. Bone stock engine versus that, it's a bigger gap. But they don't think it's that big. I asked another not factory, a Honda effort that is extremely good. Okay, like they've had top 5 results, and they've won before. We know this individual.
Yes.
He said maybe tenths. In his opinion, he said if you had standard revalve versus a full out effort, he thinks it's a couple tenths. And of course, the difference between winning and losing could be those tenths. But as far as the actual difference, in his opinion, from a full works to what you just standard revalve and throw a pipe of silencer and fuel on it and go race, a couple tenths. So that was another one. And then I've personally, I can't say who or where, but I've personally witnessed one of the best in the sport kick everyone's ass at a facility on production, bone stock, motor, ECU, bike, everything with just a standard revalve and go beat people who are very good. And so people making mains, people, very, very good. So like, I'm not saying that has shown up on race day because that's not what that particular effort would race, but I have witnessed it and I have seen it recently. And not to say that they can't be better on the works bike or whatever, but at the end of the day, the difference just has not visually or ever been seen to me. Now, that's sad for me as a motor builder. I wish I could tell you, hey, go buy this bike. You'll win every single national championship there is. But I think there are some parents out there who have probably been through the ringer and called every damn company there is and bought every badass package that some company sells and their kid didn't win. And so, there's probably some parents out there who would tell you that. So, take it for what it is. I don't know. I mean,
well, I just want to clarify what you just said there. I want to make sure nobody misses it. We're only talking about if you believe it's a raw equipment issue. You take one of the best in the sport, put him on a bone stock bike, and he beats people that are on their legitimate race bikes and beat them straight up on a relatively stocked revalved suspension. Only thing that was done to the bike, and beat them handedly. If you're only talking about equipment, I think that's a pretty solid litmus test.
Well, not the best. I mean, we're talking about the bests. I'm talking about the best, right? So like,
but we're talking about equipment for somebody who wants to think you're diluting it or spinning it a little bit. Right. No, bone stock with just a little bit of suspension, stock settings, and then beating people on their race bikes. If you want to talk about equipment, you got a $50,000 privateer bike that's being beat by a bone stock bike with just one of the best riders riding it. It invalidates. Quit blaming the equipment. Cool. It's not about the equipment. The one thing that I find, and I want to be very careful because I don't want to give away some of the things that we as a company have coming down the line, but I stand astounded at the idea that when I do a performance camp and I encourage people to grab a gear taller, and I say to the parents, I'm not taking lap times, you are. Take a lap time. Every single time, And all I'll do is I'll say, you see that straightaway, and that I'll take 2 straightaways on the track, and I'll say, you're hitting it in third. Do me a favor, short shift it when you come out of the corner. I know you're gonna think it's gonna bog. Just short shift it and just hammer the throttle. Don't touch the clutch. Do it on only those 2 straightaways. Every single camp I have ever done for the last 20 years, they're always a minimum of 2 seconds faster.
Isn't
And I
that
always say to the
wild?
parents, well, I always say to the parents, isn't that interesting? That's just simply gear inches manifesting itself against a stopwatch. Now, we watched your son, daughter, they didn't cut the track, so you can't tell me they picked up 2 seconds because they cut the track. Same bike, the track's pretty clapped out. We just took laps, 2 laps ago, we took lap time, so it's not like the track's faded that much. It's not, certainly didn't get any better, right? And yet you just picked up 2 seconds by grabbing one gear on 2 straightaways. I try to make them at least 100 meters long because it's doesn't, I don't need them to be coming into a corner 9 miles an hour faster because they grabbed 2 extra gears, right? I got to be careful not to hurt people, but everybody tells me they want speed, and then they leave the camp, and then I go to watch them at a race, and they come out of the corner, and I'm like, I'm doing this as they go by. Shift up. What are you doing? It's like we talked about it, and this is one of the problems that I see as a downfall of a lot of the facilities. The kids are so used to the riding coach coming back out tomorrow to remind them again, and then again
Oh
tomorrow,
yeah, that's well
and again
said.
tomorrow, and
Well
again
said.
tomorrow. And I remember when Ronnie Tishman would work with Adam C., they worked together 2 or 3 days a week, but Ronnie expected Adam C., Ashley Feilich, Ian Treadle, John Ames, Zach Commons. If they talked about it on Tuesday, he better see it on Wednesday. And if you know Alan C., Adam's dad, if Adam worked on something on Tuesday, it better show up on Wednesday morning.
Well,
Or
you
there's
nailed
gonna,
something that I stress to parents, and it just blows my mind. Is like, look, if you're not capable of going to the facilities full time, or even if you are, like, it's the concept's the same.
Yep.
Hey, just a sec. Just a sec. Let me go address this really quick. Sorry.
Go for it.
Mm.
Oh, too sexy for my wall. Too sexy for my car. Too sexy by far. What are the words? Too sexy for my car. Too sexy for my shoes. But not too sexy for you. I gotta learn these songs. I hope you can hear this. It's Dancing Queen by ABBA. Go, let me make what you do. Dance. Get the chance. Oh, I so hope you can hear this. Teen. You're not. That in the time of your life. Ooh, see that girl. To be the dancing queen.
Sorry about that.
Hey, no apologies, man. That's an easy
So
edit out.
yeah.
That's super clean and crisp. No problem.
So we'll okay.
You were talking about facility plague of
Yeah. So you talked about I have to remind the kid every day to do the same thing. And we can talk about this on starts. We talked about that previously. Let's just talk about it in general. I urge parents who get all gung ho about it, especially on 50s. And these kids need constant reinforcement when they're really little. That's very tough for them. So you got to establish the habits young and early, right? But let's say you're like new to the sport or you're on 85s or whatever it is. Number one, you don't need a trainer every day to get better. And that's if you're a parent and you pay attention, you hear what the trainer says, and he says, hey, your kid is not riding on the balls of his feet. You need to work on that. You go, oh, yeah, I heard that's what he said. And then they tell you how to do it. You watch how they do it. Okay, cool. Well, you should tell your kid, hey, man, we need to work on this. We, as in you, are the only one on the motorcycle who can do it. Now, I can remind you, but we need to do a drill or whatever. So you don't need to go to the trainer 5 days that week for him to tell you to put your balls of the feet on the foot peg if that's what you're working on.
Yeah.
If the trainer is teaching you some other concept, you don't need to go 5 days a week. Now, do you need seat time, repetition, and improvement? Yes, you can do that on your own. And I've always wondered, like, how long does it take to establish a habit, coach? You've talked about this a lot,
Yeah, I mean, you got all kinds of different arguments, 30, 60, 90 days, 120 days, there's all kinds.
right? But it takes a lot of repetition, right?
Mhm.
So if a guy is trying to teach you a new concept in training, how are you supposed to ingrain that and make it who you are as a rider before tomorrow?
Yourself.
Yeah, and you can't do it, right? So
Yep.
for me, that's why some of this facility stuff I don't understand. To me, it's like you got to go learn what tool that is. They give you a tool. They say, hey, this is a tool that you need to put into your toolbox as an athlete. Oh, okay. I didn't know I needed to ride the balls of my feet. Oh,
Right.
okay. I didn't know I needed to stand up through the bump. So I didn't need to know I needed to get back on the brakes and forward on the gas, whatever it is, right?
Yep.
All right. Well, let me go learn this tool. So that's going to take you hours and time and effort. And you cannot do it at race pace. You
Mhm.
don't have the habitry to do it. So you have to go slow and work on it and make it who you are until when you go fast, it's who you are. The same applies to when you shift your gears, when you're riding your motorcycle, how you're hitting the brakes, like all the things we talk about. And guess what happens on race day when it's not deeply ingrained in who you are?
Just fades away.
Days away and you do the same stuff you always
Yep.
did. And that's what I see is wrong with starts. Kids practice them, and like you said, they get told what to do. Their first start sucks. The coach comes back, says, you did this, this, this. Oh yeah, I remember all that stuff. Let me go do it. And their next start's better. Yeah, that was better. Let's do it again. Oh yeah, that was better. And by start 10, oh yeah, that was a hell of a start.
Yep.
But if I asked any human on this planet to do something 10 times in a row, the same task, they're going to get better at it.
Sure.
So what needs to happen if you're trying to get better at starts is tomorrow, start 1 needs to be where start 10 left off. Now, I'm not saying that that will happen, but over time, if you do what you need to do, it will happen. And I see the exact opposite. Every time, same thing. Kids do the same thing. They take, like you just said, the coach constantly has to reinforce to them. I think you're right. They become in the habit of being told what to do
Mhm.
instead of doing what they need to do to be successful. And I think that it's not a knock on the facilities. The guy's trying to teach you, hey, you need to do this, right? It's the knock is that you as the athlete, you as the parent, in order to get success out of your kid, is going to have to somehow convince them that, hey, you need to take this on and do it the first time. You need to do it the first time, every time on track, whatever it is. And I think the same applies to training, right? I mean, give us some examples like in that scenario. Like
Well,
not warming up is a great one you said.
yep. Well, go back to training up just a little bit because our good friend Ricky Johnson, he had one of the most profound comments. I feel so fortunate to be able to work with him in his truck racing now, and he still teaches a lot of military personnel and stuff like that. His big thing is I'm here to teach. It's your responsibility to learn. And I told him, I said, I'm gonna, with your permission, I'm gonna reiterate that over and over again at all my performance camps because unfortunately, and what's the mother of invention? Necessity, right? So I know this is an extreme example, but can you imagine if you said to your young athlete, if you don't get the whole shot, we're selling everything? Like burn the ships, right? Kind of like the Vikings came over, we're eliminating all options, we're going to make this work. Well, when you study the way that the brain learns, you like you articulated, you start slowly, you reinforce the neuromuscular, there's all kinds of neuroscience behind this when it comes to learning. When you want to learn something that has a long-term retention, you have to make it very, very stressful, and it has to be learned very almost in an aggressive manner, believe it or not, life or death situation. If you study any of the classic musicians, pianists, all the string instruments, you learn it, and then what they say is by Friday, you have to know all of it. So what it does is it forces the brain to go, "Oh goodness, I've got this short period of time," and what research has illustrated is that when you concentrate it, there's a higher level of retention. So to your point exactly, we practiced starts today, we did 50 of them. We're gonna come back now, by the way, just to give clarity on how I like to do starts, this way people wonder where I get my numbers from. There's an infinite amount of ways to get through the first turn, an infinite. You can go inside, outside, outside, inside, through the middle, 1, 2, 3, whatever you wanna call it. There's an infinite amount of ways to get through any first turn of a corner. How you get there and how you get out of it, that's the $1,000,000 question. So whenever we practice starts, when the gate hits the ground, you start the stopwatch, and then you find an obstacle after the first turn, and you stop it there. That's how you know if your starts are getting good. Now you can film timing, transition, grabbing the second shift, the use of the front brake, right, to get through the first turn. But then we're back to being able to reaccelerate when you've got a little bit of a lean angle. You get on the gas a little bit too early and you lose the rear end. The point being is, how do you know if your starts have gotten better? To me, you've got to go from when the gate drops to getting over the first obstacle from lane 1 to lane 42 at Loretta's. You got to figure it out. But once you do that, it's almost like, okay, we practiced 50 starts yesterday. We got to 12.9 seconds, right? Well, maybe that's an exaggeration. Let's say 5.9 seconds. Well, we're getting ready to do 10, and if any of them are above the 6-second mark, we're going home.
Yeah, and I think you have to place stress on your athlete that simulates race day. So how do we do that? Well, guess what? Like you said, and I hate to say this because it's not none of this comes from a bad place from parents. Okay,
Mhm.
so this is actually all their desire to be successful, which is
Yep.
the parents don't want to take it away from the kid. Well, we're so invested. We've got so much into this. I can't threaten him with that. I don't. And of course, we don't want a terrible toxic relationship, right? But we want the kid to be under the right pressure to understand that this is not a practice start. This
Yes.
is the start. And I
Yep.
think that I mean, how do you apply that? I like what your idea is here. Hey, if we don't get this right, load it up. We're done for the day.
And the only reason why I say that is from a neuroscience standpoint, they say long-term memory is when things are concentrated in time after the fundamental skill is established.
Yeah.
It's not like you're giving it to a beginner who's trying to learn how to, use a clutch and a shifter. The other thing is like
Is on.
when you're looking at when you're looking at Tiger Woods, and I'm using him only because in my, growing up, he was the man that everybody was benchmarked against. If you watch him on the driving range, he literally pulls the ball over, he completely regrips, hits the ball, opens his hands, pulls another ball out, regrips. It's what you said last time. Don't just run in the gate and drop the clutch. Go through your routine. Every time Tiger would pull a ball over, he'd regrip. And I think it ties in with exactly, and I'm hoping the parents see how it does tie in. In 20 minutes, he's getting ready to tee off with DeMarco, right? So, yeah, you're practicing, but perfect practice makes perfect. And within the next 20 minutes, you're going to be up there with a million people between TV and live galley watching you play some golf. Are you ready to step up? Or are you going to shank it? Are you going to crack? Blah, 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 blah. And this is like, and I want to come back to the comment you made just a few minutes ago. That's what I love about the parallels between physiology and engineering. If you don't warm up, we've talked a lot about the idea that, and again, I'm still fascinated with the different materials and how a motor heats up and letting it all do it correctly and letting it settle and it all starts to merge together. If I asked you to pause this webinar or this podcast and go run around your block as fast as you can, your freaking legs are going to load up and rip off your legs. But warm up for 10 or 15 minutes and then do it at 80% effort, then do it at 85%. Then by the time you go all out, it's going to hurt, but a different type of hurt, and you'll definitely be faster. Well, I didn't create the principles of a warm up. Isn't it interesting that Usain Bolt will warm up for an hour to 2 hours to run 9 seconds? If that doesn't show, now I maybe shouldn't say it here on this podcast because that's one of the leg ups that we get in our competition, right? If my athlete, particularly one that's a slow twitch muscle fiber, that means your athlete is really strong in the second half of the race but lacks sprint speed. Well, if you don't warm up, what'd you just do? Your athlete's going to use half of the race to get warmed up. And then what do we always say? We would have won, but we ran out of time. Ran out
Well,
of
and
laps,
that's
ran out.
huge. And all the pros do it, all
Yep.
the good ones.
And the
And
Europeans do, which is kind
yeah,
of funny. You look,
and it's like a
Jeff,
hard warm up.
Hunter, and Ken,
Right.
they're in Max Anstey, they're always behind the bike. They're always
Yeah.
behind the bike.
And it's not like there's a process to this, and you alluded to kind of how that is. But I mean,
Yep.
I've learned a lot from you, right? And then you start seeing it around you. So, for example,
Mhm.
power lifters or a guy trying to set his max bench lift or his max whatever. Guess what? They warm up with weight. You would think that would
Absolutely.
wear you out and make it harder. That's what I would think. Oh, I just got to go get it
Mhm.
done. But like you said, there's so much to the science, and that's the crazy
Well,
part of it.
look at Loretta's. You get there and it's 90. I think we measured it last year. It was 107 degrees. We put a thermometer down on the dirt next to the starting gate. It was 107 degrees on the dirt, right? So just because you're sweating, you're hot, but you're not metabolically warmed up. So then you have a 20-minute moto, and you know historically your athlete takes a good 10, 15 minutes. Well, you've only got 5 minutes left. Now, this is where, again, it's a little bit of our Coca-Cola syrup. We make sure our athletes are in shape to do a 40-minute moto, even on a 65. They can do a 40-minute moto because 20 now feels easy. They're in shape to be able to warm up and race 20 minutes without getting tired. There's the science.
Well, like you
And
said,
people go, "Oh, you make 65 riders train?" Yeah. We're not kicking a soccer ball or swinging a baseball bat. We're pushing and pulling a motorcycle. What's a 65 weigh wet?
like 150 pounds, maybe 120, something like that. Yeah.
It's more than what the child weighs.
Yeah.
And you're telling me that you're not going to have them do pull-ups and put now for those parents whose children haven't hit puberty yet, you take them to the playground. Let's play freeze tag. They don't see it as stop, accelerate, pivot, reaccelerate. They don't see it as proprioceptive balance. Challenge them to a pull-up contest. They don't see that as fitness. They see they're challenging their parent. Go to the BMX track, go to the pump track. They don't see it as muscular endurance. They don't see it as building any kind of raw power, but they are. Now, when they get pushing and pulling a 100+ pound bike at speed, I'm sorry, it's not that, like we said earlier, it's not the ground that hurts, it's the quick stop that hurts.
Well, and it's phenomenal, like you said, and I think a lot of motocross athletes have lost out on what you talked about. So I luckily grew up just playing every sport, and that was at the
Mhm.
time culturally more appropriate. Meaning, back then kids didn't just do baseball or just do
Right.
basketball. It was like you played every sport, and everybody
Whatever
could.
season it was. Yeah,
Yeah, and it was
exactly.
fine, and that was okay.
Yeah.
Now we have a different culture, right? But I think that's sad for kids because I think every kid should enjoy the opportunity to be a part of a team sport and coaching
Well,
and training.
especially when you can't go pro until you're 18. What are we
Right.
doing?
Well, we
We're
need great
wearing this
athletes.
child out at 12 and 13 years old.
Yeah. We need
Yeah,
great athletes, right? And like you
we got
said,
some we got some big ringers that had stellar amateur careers that amounted to nothing.
right. And I think like you said, we need great athletes even in moto, like somebody who can run and tag. Like I mean, I was a decent athlete as a kid, right? And if you
Mhm.
you have like a certain ability to cut and to jump and to run, and
Sure.
some kids are more athletic than others, but almost any kid who played competitive sport that I played with could do all of these things at different levels.
Yep.
You see a lot of motocross athletes now, they walk with kind of bowed knees and they look goofy and they're like, don't, they are amazing athletes. These are fast riders, but they haven't applied that to other athletic skills.
Mhm.
And it's kind of, I call it that, and no offense to him, but like Adam Cincerello talked about later on in his career, he became so focused. It's like he can't shoot a basketball to save his life because he never did. Now, granted, this is the best amateur that ever existed, right? Like he was
Yep.
the best. I mean, I hate to, like, there's no way Ricky or James are better than him, AC. Period. The dude was a beast. But
Mhm.
like, because his late in his career, he became so specifically focused. Now, like, I bet he actually shoots better now, but he wasn't trained for that. And I feel like when kids are young, it's so nice if they can they don't have to be great at basketball. But like you said, go play on the playground, play with your friends, have fun, do tag and do this and that. And I think that builds like what you talked about, an athlete who's resilient and all the things you talked about.
But I hate to sound politically incorrect here, but it's our show. We can do what we want. And I think our subscribers and listeners will appreciate it. We did some really dangerous stuff. We built a skateboard park. Excuse me. We built a half pipe in our backyard with sheets of plywood that wasn't geometrically perfect and engineered very well. We were catching the trucks at the top of the coping and free falling 8 feet and like, fuck, that hurts. And
Yeah.
we would try to drop into swimming pools and eat the bottom of the pool. And I just don't see the kids, like, you think about skateboarding just from a balance standpoint. We're trying to just, I mean, I remember it was cool to do a 360, right?
Right. Like the level has
Cool.
moved. Yeah.
Yeah, then try to go to a 720, and then all of a sudden skate parks came, and then we were, how high could we come out of the park with the swimming pools, and we had the measurement devices. Then the freestyle BMX came in, and you've got Fiola and these guys just going full send mode, and it was cool because then we went into half pipes, and we had Team Hutch that was dragging half pipes around and doing high school, doing elementary, middle school in the parking lot. kids learn to do, we'd drive our bikes off the top of the roof. We built jumps during the summer to go lake jumping. You
Right.
don't see that shit anymore. Everybody keeps in this little coddled, and I get it,
Mhm.
right? It's expensive and all that, but the kids have no balance. They balance meaning like they don't know how to
Yep.
ride a skateboard. They don't ride their bicycles off the roof of the house. We used to jump them into the pool, lake jumping, blah 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 blah. And now you look at the kids now, and yeah, like you said, give them a skateboard, give them a pogo stick. Now you'll always have one out of 100 that can do it, but for the most part, they've just become. And the funny part is they're not even getting paid yet. It's not like that young man that got pulled out of F3. What's
Right.
his name? Ante, I think is his name.
Mhm. I think
The
you're right.
youngest, the guy that just got pulled in, and he got put into Hamilton's spot on
Yeah.
in Formula One, and in fact, he just won his
Yeah,
first.
he just won, 18 years old,
He
I
just
think.
won his first one this past weekend. But the point being is, nobody who's listening to this, maybe less than one half of 1% of our listeners are getting paid to race amateur wise. So why does he need to be so single track that that's all he's good at when he's not getting paid yet?
Well, and here's a
What?
counter, coach. Let me ask you. Oh, well, they hear, well, our competition is we got to do what they do.
Well, if you look at now, and I'm going to quote Deegan here, Brian, when he got interviewed by Jace and they were in the backyard, and Jace asked him, or I don't know if it was asked or if Brian offered it up. He said, "We've tried everything. We've done backflips, we've done freestyle, we've done BMX, we've done mountain bike, skateboarding." He says, "We've done it all. We don't know if it's worked, but we'll find out."
And I agree with that entirely.
There's
Like,
no magic. There's no magic path.
no, most of
You
like
know?
I was a pretty diverse athlete. I didn't just focus on moto, so I could do a lot
Yeah.
really well back then. But a lot of the really good moto guys I know when I grew up were athletic, right?
Mhm.
Like, wow, man, he just jumped on that skateboard and just did that. Like, they have good
Absolutely.
skills, right? Because they were exposed to it and they play with it. Now I get it, like you said, it's risky, break an arm, this, that, the other, right? But it is a shame when like a moto athlete has these weird looking knees when they walk and they don't look like they don't do things athletically, if you would call it.
Right.
I years ago destroyed my knee in high school and really, really bad. So long and short, I had to go
How'd you
through
do it? On the
dirt
motorcycle
bikes.
or another?
Yeah, yeah.
Okay.
Had a huge
Okay.
crash, dislocated, severed my artery, tore everything out of the knee, and blah
Mm.
blah blah. So I still terrible knee to this day. So when I was in PT, like I was an athlete, right? So when I had to, hey, jump and do this drill and do that, I just did it the
Sure.
right way because I had grown up doing those sports. And I'll never forget, I'm in there and the PT guy's like, oh, come over here, like to some softball athletes and to some other people, like, hey, we've been telling you guys that's how you need to do it. And I didn't know. I'm like, what do you mean? He's like, look at his knees. And I'm like, I don't know what I'm doing, right? But he
Just
had brought up
jumping.
a good point. Yeah. He said, man, a lot of at the time, and I'm glad this is changing, a lot of the girls would come in and tear ACLs out because they never played as kids in the playground. I jumped off the damn top thing of the playground and did
Yeah.
stupid things little, all our friends.
Roof of the house.
Yeah, like I literally have done that, right? And it's hard on the body, but you learned how to do it and how to land and all that stuff. And it built strength as I've learned now from you.
Yep.
So they said a lot of women at the time and females, young female athletes who were getting into high school sports and hadn't really had a long athletic upbringing, but were getting into it, would jump weird and funny, and knees would bend and tear ACLs and hurt their knees because they didn't do it correctly. And I'm like,
Right.
that's not even something that even crossed my mind. Right.
Mhm.
And so I think the same applies in motocross. Your kid falls off the bike. How do they land? How do they hit the ground? Like how did Hayden hit the ground when he helicoptered? That's one of the most athletic moments we've ever seen in motocross, you know?
Absolutely. Well, add
So
one step further. I mean, when was the last time we've talked about a rider learning how to fall, tuck and roll? Go back to when Eric Bartolos was where, for the people who are listening to this, Eric Bartolos is known as Big E in our sport. He's the big guy at Yoshimura, and he just started his own podcast. Definitely give it a listen. But with Big E was the team manager for GT Bicycles. So he was into motocross and he got Jeremy McGrath a GT bike, and Jeremy's tremendous amount of pictures of him going full send at a pump track, um, throwing all kinds of nasty whips and tabletops and looking like Tim Judge out there, fully flat. And this is just a motocross guy. Well, here's what's interesting, tying our conversation here today, Derek. All right, so we have Bubba that brings the scrub into the sport, adds a new dynamic to the sport. Many people don't realize that Jeremy McGrath was the first guy that made it cool. As you said earlier, as soon as that rear wheel's about to hit that landing ramp, you're on the gas hard. Well, where did he give credit to? riding BMX. So because of that, and that's why I think it's so cool what Brian said about Hayden, they did the pump track, they did the BMX track, they've done everything under the sun from wakeboarding to snowboarding to, but is it one shoe fits all? No, but how diversified. You just articulated about him being Hayden doing that helicopter when he got thrown off the bike. Well, how many times did he get thrown off trying to do backflips on a 65? How many times did he get thrown off at the pump track, the BMX track, this, that, and the next thing? It all lends itself to being durable, bouncing and not breaking, eye-hand coordination, good balance, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, remember
Maybe
when Jeremy McGrath was promoting the Moto Pogo?
right, right.
I'm
Well,
gonna
and
show
it's
my
seeing all
age
them
here.
did kind of shenanigans that we probably can't get away with nowadays when they partied and did the helicopter stuff and the boats and whatever they were
Yeah.
into. But they also free rode in the hills. And that's just
Yep.
if you grew up in my era, like my age, that was moto culture was like it was
Absolutely.
awesome. We
Mhm.
can't really do it as much. I mean, California still has it, but it's harder and harder, more and more
Mhm.
restrictions. But you saw it on those films where they would show some of the crashes that they might have. And it's like those guys, they didn't show all of it.
Right.
They learned how to tumble and they learned how to
Yeah.
make mistakes. They learned how to control the bike and they learned how to be athletic functionally for motocross, right? And I think that
Or know where the bike's going to get away from you and get away from it
yes,
early enough instead of thinking you can ride it
yeah,
out and you're like, you're at a point of diminishing returns. You better have an exit plan.
yeah,
Didn't
and they
mean
were
to run
so
too
good
bad. I
at
think
it.
that's so cool.
Yeah, and their timing, and if you go watch the old tracks, they weren't built as a set spec. They were different everywhere, so you had to have adaptability in your distance
Mhm.
control. Can I make this double? Can I not? You know, there's some
Well,
it
like
is
you
like
said
RJ.
earlier, what gear do I need to be in at how much throttle to go 112 feet versus
Right,
when it's 61 feet versus it's 125 feet
right.
based on what's in front of it. I don't see that being taught.
No, and we have, people judge, you learn over time, but like those guys, I mean, like a Wyndham could go hit a transfer sight unseen first time because he grew up doing that stuff and then he was the best at it. But
People don't
MC and them had it
understand.
too. No,
People don't understand what he was doing. When you put
not
that
that
in
it's unreal.
perspective,
And racing in
hitting
some
the
of those events.
side of hitting the side of a jump
Yeah.
that's not packed down, that's not designed to be hit, and just boom,
And
and then
perfection.
just full flat, looking at the crowd, and then just butter the backside at a 45-degree angle.
And he
That's
is unreal.
insane.
Insane.
It's
And those
absolutely
guys
insane.
did that for fun.
Yep.
Right. And so that was now it is risky. Like, I mean, I was a more cautious type. I didn't like free riding. That scared me. Right. But for some
Yep.
of these guys, that's why I never could make it to the top. Cause to those guys, that's fun. I could control the bike. I can do whatever I want. I know exactly how far that jump is first try. That's why they were good. Right. So, yeah, I think that's just the diversity of being a good rider. Now we have kids. So we've talked about this on the show who follow the line on the track. They go through the rut. That might be the fastest line today in the practice track. But then they come race day, and sometimes you might need to search. Sometimes you might need to hop out of the rut. Sometimes maybe you cross a rut. And I've had a talk with a client recently about that where he went to facility and the guy's like, I don't want you doing this in this corner. We're hitting this rut. And he's like, I'm loading my kid up and I left. He said, I want my kid to go where he wants to go. I
Yep.
get the trainer's point, but I also don't want to teach my kid to just go through a rut. And so those are the
Not
things
slot
that we
car
struggle
racing.
with. Right.
Yeah,
We
not
struggle
slot
with.
car racing. Well,
Yeah.
and we'll wrap it up with this because I appreciate everybody sticking with us. This has been a great conversation today. The thing that I always amazed with, and I've talked to several high-end agents, a lot of the facility kids are not attractive to the agents anymore. And here's the reason why. You get trained to either chase somebody, but you never learn how to go catch them and run through them. And then you get the whole shot at, let's say, a high profile race like Loretta's. You've never had that real world experience of being a leader. You're only good if you can chase somebody because they always put the fastest guy last, right? So now what ends up happening is he's used to always having somebody to chase. And then that becomes a skill that unfortunately, okay, now you've caught the guy. Now what do you do with it? And you see guys will make up a 5-second gap and then they'll catch the leader and then they don't drop them by 5 seconds, even though they just bridged 5 seconds in 3 laps. And if you know Mitch Payton, what's his biggest pet peeve? Consistency, consistency, consistency. You will not get a ride with Mitch unless you're consistent. So if you have a young athlete and you want to ride for Mitch one day, Mitch sits in his office during Loretta's and he just watched laps times. And I know that for a fact, right? I don't know if he still does now because he's got such a big team that works for him and with him. Maybe he doesn't do it as much, but I know that's a big stickler of his. If you can't, obviously, you've got to work with speed, but the speed's got to be consistent and sustainable.
Well, and I'll say
That's
this to a parent about that concept. I was, like I said, I didn't watch, I wasn't at Spring Ding, so
right.
I didn't watch it. But I watch the lap times. I go look at the lap charts. I, try to keep up with it as best I can, and just follow our guys and follow who's good in the sport.
Yeah.
I On paper, I know the track's different. I know the conditions vary. I know it's not the same every moto. But if your kid in his best lap time is 6, 7, 8 seconds a lap off of the leaders, which is feasible between a first and a 10th, or first and an eighth, first and a there's some pretty fast kids out there.
Yeah.
But like, if that's the case, I'm sorry, but you are not where you need to be yet to be a winner. And it's not a negative, right? It's not, but you can chase
You just
suspension,
got
you
some
can
work to
chase,
do.
right. You can
You got
chase
some work to do.
suspension, you can chase bike, and you can chase nutrition, and you can chase fitness, but not one of those items will just immediately take where you're at now. Same rider. Oh, we did our nutrition better and our hydration better, and our bike is 10% better now, and our suspension's 10. It will not bridge this 6 second lap gap you have.
Mhm.
Unfortunately, that's a big gap. Now, if you come to me and you're like, dang, we lost by 5/10 a lap. We just could not beat that guy. He was better than us. Maybe, right? Maybe your bike's a little off. Maybe your suspension's a little off. Maybe it's hydration. Maybe, and now hydrate. Now, to me, fitness is a huge part of the amateurs. If you're falling off, that's clear, right?
Mm.
But that's an area where you're like, okay, yeah, maybe we need to grind at the bike. But that's the other side. Like, I watched some junior lap times in 85. So these are 85s. Sure, they could be bought. It's unlikely that they're cheating. Nobody decided to protest, so they're probably a legal bike. When they go turn faster lap times than the vast majority of the super mini class, like the winner of the junior class, look, man, even if you have the world's worst 105, it's bone stock, nothing done to it. You bolted it on. You are 5 seconds lap slower. Like, let's just say you're in 25th in the super mini class or something like that. You're a good rider. You're a bad dude, but you're
Yeah.
5 seconds a lap off of the winner in the junior class on an 85. I'm sorry, man. Like, you've got work to do, and it's not your equipment, and it's not your horsepower, and it's not, it could be your suspension a little bit, but that's not that 5 seconds a lap. And
But you
that's
just
the
bring up
sad part.
something you just brought up something that's so incredibly important. If I'm working with you as an athlete, and let's say on a Monday through Sunday basis for 6 weeks, your average time on the motorcycle, I'm just gonna use loose numbers for the sake of illustration. Let's say that we're putting 4 hours a week on the motorcycle. Let's say we're doing 2 hours a week off the motorcycle. That's 6 hours of work. I'm getting you at a certain intensity, and I'm getting you to hold that for a certain period of time. Just go with me here for illustration. If I take 1 day's workout and I've had you do 60 minutes worth of work, depending on your age, and you tell me that your son got tired doing a 6-minute race, I'm sorry, that's not a fitness issue because we've already gone 10 times that amount of distance if I just do 1 week, right? So that's where I don't know why the parents get into the blame game. You've got all the evidence, 6, 8, 10 months of training going into a race, and then the racer's inconsistent. Suspension sucks. Motor doesn't work. Fitness program doesn't work. What are you talking about? The motor on the dyno put out this power curve. You guys have trained on it. Everybody liked it. We've got testing every 6 weeks. We've got 5 weeks of training in between testing sessions. The volume of training has been completed. The percentage, at what percentage do we, if you're doing 6 hours a week, and if I'm looking for 20% of that at race pace or above based on heart rate, because you can go heart rate, you can go race pace intensity, not on the motorcycle. We can talk about that in another show. But when you start looking at the idea that your athlete is fit enough to do 1 hour at race pace, if you take the whole week, they've shown that they can go 60 minutes at race pace. So now let's break it down into 10 6-minute motos. Let's break it into 6 10-minute motos. It's still an hour. They've already proven that they can do this, and they've done it for 3, 4, 5, 6 months. And then the athlete, all of a sudden, his lap times are inconsistent. Fitness doesn't work. What are you talking about? The motor
Well,
doesn't
and
work.
that's,
You've
yeah.
got all the dyno numbers. Now, again, this isn't a blame game, but the fitness has already been established. You've already proven that. The motor's been dynoed. It's already been established. It's now your responsibility as a rider to shift it correctly, eat properly, stay hydrated, warm up, adjust your strategy based on the race course. Is it 6 motos in 1 day, or is it 1 moto over 6 days? Adjust your But it's not me blaming the motor. The motor guy's not blaming the fitness guy. The fitness guy's not blaming. It's, hey, bud, at the end of the day, you have to own it. And I'm amazed how many parents, I'll get on a phone call weekend after, oh, we've got work to do. We've got work to do. I
Yeah.
don't know what the hell's going on. We got work to do." And I'm like, "It's just racing, dude." He went down, got a bad start. I don't know what to tell you. It's not a fitness issue. It's not a bike issue. It's not a suspension. Sure, you can always 1% here or there, but
Yeah,
I can
that's
tell you that if your athlete doesn't graze all day, his depth perception is going to be negatively impacted. And you say to me, Rob, he ate meticulously. Here's his food log. Okay, well, you just answered your own question. It
well, and I always
was
ask
a depth
parents, right?
perception issue.
On the bike, what do you think the best bike on the track is better than yours, if it's better? Give me a percentage, right? If you think that there's like for example, the physics of this are actually pretty easy, and someday we'll do a YouTube video on it. But if you have a 125 or a 112 or a 105, whatever it is, right? Hey, if you really search around the internet, there's really cool two-stroke forums out there for other segments of racing and people who are passionate about scooters and one-off castings, and they publish their dyno charts. It's all over the place, right? The world's fastest engines are in the 50cc to 125cc range, and every piece of information that's ever existed on it is published on the internet if you want to look around. So you kind of already know if you look around what kind of numbers exist, but there's reasons behind that. Why is this kind of the limit for this engine? Sure, that limit 1% itself per year in the elite cycles, but it doesn't leapfrog, right? So how far off are you? Oh, we're 10% off on motor. Okay, so you are 10% off. You're on a Super Mini somewhere around the range of 3 horsepower worse. Okay. Well, how much lap time difference is that? Because I know for a fact that it will not correlate to a 10% improvement in your pace. I wish it would, right? But it doesn't.
Sure.
So, okay. And then how far off on your suspension? Now, it is possible somebody's a kind of a long ways off, but if you're that far off, just go put the stock stuff on. Like maybe you're way out of left field, right?
But let me interrupt you for just a moment. If you're off that much at a national and you have me helping you and you have Derek Harris building you a motor, like at what point are you going to jump in and start learning how to set your bike up versus just saying it's always somebody else? This goes back to what you said earlier. If you're not going to hire Derek Harris to go to the race to help you set up the suspension, then you have to become a student of the suspension.
And Rick Johnson said that.
Rick Johnson says it all the time. And that's the part that I guess I'm a little bit baffled when we look at the idea of, okay, you think it's so much better, but what are you doing to bridge that? You've already invested in the internals and the motor and the suspension and all that. But then when it comes to the glue, that's where I firmly believe that a lot of people like to build in an excuse before the race even begins. So we've already got an out. Finish
Well, and
it
it's
up
like you hear parents. Yeah, I
but
said parents. I heard
you
one
gotta know
parent
how
of
to set
Loretta.
up suspension, man. If you're gonna buy it, come on.
Well, and like we're working towards this, but people, we talked about this. Here's your suspension current setting window. That's clicker all the way in versus all the way out. So that's what it can do. And I have parents who are like, oh, one click changed my life. And I'm like, dude, depending where you are in the clicker range, it may not have even done anything. That's another thing that
Right.
people don't get. It's a orifice and, it's an orifice and a needle that goes in and out. And as the needle gets further out, it doesn't really do anything. The needle becomes most effective as we wind it in, and then like when you close it from 0 to 5 clicks on any suspension is really where, okay, that's a change, that's a change, that's a change, and the difference just kind of falls away as we go out. So when I love, it's the same as people like, oh, I've turned out that particular moto. My left fork was clicked at 10 and my right fork was clicked at 12 and it was all over the place and it was terrible. I'm like, okay, so your suspension acted like the clicker was at 11.
Mm-hmm.
Well, it was all the way in and all the way out. Okay, so your suspension acted like it was at 12. That's not how that works. Yes, that's how that works.
It works.
You don't have to believe me, but it is. And it's
Yep.
funny because now, can it make a difference if you're, I'll give you a good example where I was at testing with one of these teams. They were do some stuff and suspension was on that list. And the guy doing that's amazing. Very, very talented individual, but he's like banging through suspension sets, trying to get some changes done for these guys. And so, here you go, put on the bike. Well, as a mechanic, if you're a racing mechanic, take notes if you're a rookie, your job is to set the clickers for your rider before he gets on the bike, not your guy hammering out a revalve for you really quickly while he's doing 10 sets, right? Not saying he can't do it, but he might miss it. Right. Just like you should set your sat, which you're going to do. So one of the guys get out there and it's his race bike and he's like, hey, something's up. I don't know what is up. The front end feels weird. And I'm like, okay, it's a brand new bike. Okay, is he bullshitting? Is he not bullshitting? Let's watch. So I watch around it and he comes back, man, it just feels so low. I'm like watching it. I'm not seeing that. I'm not seeing it be soft. right? And I'm not seeing his fork kite off and the sag looked okay. And I'm not the suspension guy, right? I'm just we were doing testing on other stuff.
Yeah.
But I'm like, I'll go walk to a rhythm section and I watch him land and then go into the corner. And what my eyes saw was like, ooh, dang, this rebound looks really slow. Man, there's no way. And I'm not familiar with this team and their settings that well at the time, first day at the track, right? And I'm like, oh, that guy was just working on that suspension. Maybe he didn't set the clicker. Sure enough, clicker, and on this particular set of suspension, that brand, when you do it, it'll go all the way in. It'll be maxed out stiff on the rebound, maxed out slow. Sure enough, it was maxed out. Oh, boom. What's your normal setting? Mechanic. Oh, dude, pull out your notes. What's your normal setting? Do you not know what your guy runs? Oh, let me look it up. Oh, hey, I got it. Great. Set the clicker. Away you go. The point is, yes, something like that where your guy likes to ride right here and you have it set right here. Yes, that's a huge difference. But if your guy likes to ride right here and your clicker setting is right here or right here, I'm sorry, that's not 6 seconds a lap. Right. And if your window is here, let's call it, this is your window. And you've tested and you got a suspension shop and you think you're right. And somehow the race window that you needed to be was there. How the heck did you end up over here?
Exactly. Yep.
Do you mean to tell me that whatever suspension company convinced you that they were worth using means they have a good brand and good reputation enough for you to call them and you said, yeah, we like our stuff. We sent it out. We like it. We tested it. And somehow you showed up. To me, that tells you, A, you have no clue what you're doing. Maybe you should work at that. And most parents don't. I don't blame them for that. You just got to work at it to know. And then number 2, what are you practicing on? It was good in practice. Oh, there's no conditions like the national. I agree with you. So how do we test to make sure that this is kind of what we're used to? If you've been in the national more than 2 years in a row, you know what to expect.
Or you should at least have it written down, which comes back full circle. Like, I'm always amazed if you go and you work with Jeff with MX Clinic, he's going to have a few things that are really his pet peeve. Write them down and then go work with Ben Riddle, and then go work with Jamie Hunkler. And the idea is write them down because they each are very good at what they do. They see things completely different. And mom and dad, you write down what you thought you heard the riding coach say, because we all know, mom and dad, you're going to hear it differently than the rider. The rider's going to hear it different than mom and dad. At the end of the day, it's not who's right or wrong. Hey, why are we not able to get through this particular section? Are we sitting down too early? Sitting down too late? Are we too far forward or too far? Whatever it is, that's what these facilities are good at. If Colleen Millsaps, who's got an incredible eye, picks up on something, if Josh Woods picks up on something, write it down, because probably if they picked up on it, it's probably an old bad habit of yours, unless you're dealing with like a 65 rider. But by the time you get into 85s, those riding coaches, and I know that some riding coaches don't like you working with other riders, but if you switch factory teams, you're going to have different riding coaches. You've got Burner, who's helping out with Chad and with Jet and those guys. And then boom, you come over. Now you're working with Brock Tickle. And then you're back over here. You're working with Marias, or, I know they're not riding coaches, but you know what I'm trying to say. Every riding coach, you've got to learn how to learn from other people. And you may not like this new guy that you're working with. You didn't go there because you like him or don't like him. You go there to see if he can help you or she can help you learn a little bit more, get a little bit better.
100%.
It doesn't have to be so territorial.
Right. Even if it doesn't quite line up with how you do things, maybe there's a concept there that's like, well, I don't want to do it the way he said. That's not me. But he said I need to get the front end pushed down and I don't want to get my head for it. So come up with a way that suits you that gets the job. And I always tell people, you know what? I could be the worst riding coach on the planet. And if I'm a parent, but you know what I can do? I can watch and I can observe everyone. So let's go watch the best here today. And in this section, what are they doing? What do they look like? What is their body positioning? What is the speed? What is the braking? What is the gear? What is the throttle? What is the clutch? Okay, let's see you. Oh, wow, you let off 5 feet earlier, or you let off too late. The bike was bucking and kicking you, right? And then you were late to get leaned over in the turn and late to get on the gas, and you overcharged, right? But you got to go watch those guys and say, all right, what is he doing better than me? Now, I can see that, right? I can tell you, wow, you were literally at least half a second a lap slower in that one corner than your competition. You were good everywhere else. I don't know why. That one corner's got your number on it. So how about, it's like how we talked about, identify weaknesses, improve them, get better. So the weakest areas you have on the track, that's the area you need to go improve, because you cannot improve your strong sections but just this little bit much, right? So you got to improve
Well,
your weakest.
and you look at somebody like a Jake Weimer who is kind enough, to come back and want to be able to, I guess you could say same thing with Kevin Windham and these guys. What a privilege that is. Because, as much as we joke about it, those guys have more time on a practice track than you and I have
Right.
in our field of profession, right? If you're
Right.
looking at just sheer hours. And to think that you have a Jake Weimer, a Kevin Windham, those guys that are giving back, the Ben Riddles who've been there and done that. Wow. I mean, we grew up running from the police officers riding in an orange grove
Right.
on one bike that we had to rebuild the top end after 3 or 4 hours if we were lucky.
Right.
But now you guys have a practice track with a very, very accomplished rider. Wow, what a privilege on bikes that you can put 50, 60 hours on and
Which
they're
is
still
unreal.
pretty, it is unreal. It's nuts. But
All right,
well,
coach.
brother, always appreciate your time. I want to thank everybody who's has been subscribing and listening. The numbers have grown very, very quickly, and we say thank you very much. This is a longer show than usual, but as you can see, it's unscripted, and we like to share as much as we can, and hopefully we've brought some perspective. I'd like to thank everybody over at Energy Fuel for supporting the show. Derek, thank you for your time, and we'll see you next month.
Thanks, coach. I learned a lot from you, and I always enjoy our chats.
Peace.